It didn't begin with applause, it began with a pause. A moment so brief, yet so heavy, that those seated inside Windsor Castle's grand banquet hall would later describe it as the silence that changed everything. When King Charles III rose from his chair and turned toward Catherine, Princess of Wales, something shifted, not just in the room but within the very foundation of the monarchy itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What followed was not part of any known script, not something rehearsed or quietly approved in advance by palace aides. Those closest to the inner workings of the crown would later suggest that even senior staff had only fragments of what was about to unfold, as if the moment itself had been deliberately concealed until the very last second. Prince William, seated beside Catherine, maintained his composure, but insiders would later whisper that there was a brief, almost imperceptible dash of recognition in his expression, as though he understood the weight of what was coming before anyone else in the room did. The atmosphere had already been charged long before Charles stood. There had been quiet glances exchanged across the table, subtle pauses in conversation, a tension that did not belong in a room meant for celebration. Reports suggest that factions within the royal household had been growing increasingly divided in recent months, with questions of legacy, influence, and the future direction of the monarchy becoming impossible to ignore. And yet, none of those undercurrents prepared anyone for the moment when Charles, visibly weakened yet carrying a strange and unshakable resolve, deviated from the words placed before him. Palace aides, trained to anticipate every variable, were caught off guard. The speech in his hand no longer mattered. The carefully crafted messaging, the diplomatic tone, the expected formalities, they dissolved in an instant. Instead, he spoke with something far more personal, far more deliberate. And then it happened. The words that would ripple far beyond those walls. She's the one. 4 simple words, delivered without hesitation, directed unmistakably at Catherine. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even those accustomed to the unpredictable nature of royal life found themselves unprepared for the magnitude of what had just been said. Because within the monarchy, declarations are never casual. They are signals. They are decisions. And sometimes, they are warnings. The weight of those words did not settle immediately. It lingered, suspended in the air, as though waiting for the room to catch up to what had just occurred. Some looked to William, others to Catherine, and a few those who understood the deeper currents at play turned their attention to what this meant for the delicate balance of power within the royal family. Because this was not just a moment of praise. It was something far more consequential, something that hinted at a shift that had already begun long before that night. And as the silence slowly gave way to uneasy murmurs, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was not a spontaneous declaration, not an emotional slip or a fleeting thought spoken aloud. It was calculated. It was intentional. And it had been building, quietly and deliberately, behind palace walls for far longer than anyone outside those inner circles had realized. But what seemed like a spontaneous declaration was anything but. It was the final move in a quiet strategy that had been building behind palace walls for months. Long before that fateful night, the crown had already begun to tremble, not from public criticism, but from something far more dangerous: internal uncertainty. With whispers surrounding King Charles III's declining health growing louder, the question no one dared ask out loud became impossible to ignore: who would truly lead when the time came? Those whispers did not emerge all at once. They crept in slowly, quietly, carried through private corridors and sealed conversations, growing stronger with every passing week. Reports suggest that behind closed doors, Charles had been facing mounting physical strain, forcing him to step back from duties he had once carried with unwavering consistency. And while official statements maintained a tone of calm reassurance, insiders began to notice subtle shifts, engagements quietly reassigned, appearances shortened, decisions delayed. It was not chaos, not yet, but it was enough to unsettle those who understood how fragile the balance of the monarchy could become when uncertainty takes root at the top. In that silence, responsibility did not vanish, it moved. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, it began to settle on the shoulders of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. At first, it seemed routine. A few additional appearances, a slightly more prominent role in key discussions, a growing presence in matters that once belonged solely to the reigning monarch. But those watching closely understood that this was more than a temporary adjustment. It was a quiet transition, unfolding without announcement, without ceremony. Catherine, in particular, became a focal point of attention not because she demanded it, but because of how she carried it, composed, measured, unshaken. While others reacted to pressure, she absorbed it, turning uncertainty into stability in a way that did not go unnoticed by those within the institution. But stability, in a system built on hierarchy and legacy, can also create tension, because as Catherine's influence grew, so too did the unease among those who saw the future of the monarchy differently. At the center of that quiet resistance stood Queen Camilla, whose role within the royal structure had always required careful navigation. Reports and interpretations vary, but some insiders whisper that concerns began to surface. Among traditionalists, questions about influence, about alignment, about whose vision would ultimately shape the monarchy's next chapter. Camilla's presence remained strong, her position secure on the surface. Yet beneath that surface, the dynamics were shifting in ways that could not be easily controlled. The monarchy, bound by centuries of tradition, has always relied on the illusion of unity. It is not merely expected at, is essential. And yet, maintaining that image became increasingly difficult as internal fractures widened. Public appearances were carefully managed, statements meticulously crafted, every gesture calculated to project stability. But behind that controlled exterior, debates intensified. Not loud, not public, but persistent. Conversations about legacy, about continuity, about what kind of leadership the future demanded. It was no longer just about preserving tradition. It was about adapting without appearing to change. And in the middle of it all stood Catherine, steady, consistent, quietly commanding respect. She did not push forward, did not claim space, did not disrupt the order. And yet, she became impossible to ignore. Not because she sought power, but because she embodied something the monarchy desperately needed in that moment: trust, a sense of continuity that felt both familiar and forward-looking. It was this balance, this quiet strength, that began to shift perceptions, not just within the palace, but beyond it. The public saw grace. Insiders saw something far more significant: a figure capable of holding the institution together when uncertainty threatened to pull it apart. But the deeper the shift became, the more inevitable the confrontation felt, because power within the monarchy does not simply move without consequence. It challenges existing structures, unsettles established roles, and forces decisions that can no longer be delayed. What had begun as whispers was now becoming impossible to contain. The question was no longer whether a decision would be made, but when, and how openly it would unfold. And while the public saw composure, insiders knew a deeper struggle was unfolding, one that would soon force a decision no monarch had ever made so openly. The chandeliers shimmered, crystal glasses clinked. But beneath the elegance of Windsor Castle's grand banquet, something electric pulsed through the room. This wasn't just another royal gathering, it was a stage. And every word spoken that night would carry consequences far beyond those gilded walls. Windsor Castle has always been more than a residence. It is a symbol. A fortress of continuity, where decisions are not just made, they are remembered, echoed, and woven into the fabric of history itself. And on that night, as senior royals, political figures, and carefully selected dignitaries gathered under one roof, there was an unspoken understanding that this evening carried a different kind of weight. Not obvious, not announced, but present, lingering, beneath every formal exchange and polite conversation. Reports suggest that even before the speeches began, there was a subtle shift in energy, as though those closest to the inner circle sensed that something was about to unfold, something that could not be undone once spoken aloud. At the center of it all stood King Charles III, a figure both commanding and increasingly fragile. His presence still carried authority, but there was a noticeable strain beneath it, a quiet reminder of the pressures that had been building for months. The speech placed before him had been carefully prepared, every word chosen to maintain balance, to reassure, to preserve the image of stability that the monarchy depends on. But as he began to speak, something shifted. It was subtle at first. A pause, a glance downward that lasted just a second longer than expected. And then, without warning, he moved away from the script. Palace aides, trained to anticipate even the smallest deviation, felt it immediately. This was not part of the plan. Seated nearby, Catherine, Princess of Wales, remained composed, her expression calm, her posture unchanged. Yet those who have spent years observing the smallest nuances of royal behavior would later suggest that there was a moment brief, almost imperceptible, where even she seemed to sense that something significant was about to happen. Beside her, Prince William watched closely, his attention fixed not just on his father, but on the direction this moment was beginning to take. Because within the monarchy, unscripted moments are never truly spontaneous. They are signals. They are decisions unfolding in real time. And then came the turning point. Charles's voice, steady but carrying an unmistakable weight, shifted in tone. The formalities faded. The distance between monarch and family narrowed. And in a moment that would later be dissected, debated, and quietly analyzed behind palace doors, he turned his attention directly toward Catherine. What followed? It was not elaborate. It was not layered in royal language or softened by tradition. It was direct, clear, unavoidable. A public acknowledgement that broke from convention and stepped into something far more personal, far more revealing. Gasps, though restrained, rippled through the room. Conversations halted. Even those accustomed to the unpredictable nature of royal life found themselves caught in the gravity of what had just been said. William's reaction, though controlled, did not go unnoticed. Supportive, yes, but there was also something else beneath the surface. A recognition. An understanding that this moment carried implications far beyond the immediate shock. Because what had just happened was not simply praise, not a fleeting acknowledgement meant to honor a role well performed. It was something deeper, something that touched the core of succession, influence, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. Those present may not have fully grasped it in that instant, but they felt it. The shift. The recalibration of something long considered fixed. And as the evening continued, attempting to return to its carefully curated rhythm, the weight of those words refused to settle. They lingered in every glance, every measured response, every quiet exchange that followed. Because in a place like Windsor Castle, where history is not just remembered but actively shaped, moments like this do not exist in isolation. They ripple outward, touching decisions yet to be made, alliances yet to be tested, and roles yet to be redefined. And while the surface remained composed, the reality beneath it had already begun to change in ways that could not be reversed, because the real shock wasn't just what Charles said, it was what those words implied about the future of the monarchy. She's the one. 4 simple words. But inside the monarchy, words are never just words. They are signals, decisions, and sometimes declarations of war. And as those words echoed through Windsor Castle, they ignited a reaction that no one could contain. What had just been spoken by King Charles III did not remain suspended in that moment. It began moving instantly, spreading through the room like a quiet shockwave, reaching every corner, every conversation, every carefully guarded thought. Because within the royal institution, language is power. It is measured, controlled, and rarely, if ever, left open to interpretation. And yet, this time, interpretation was unavoidable. Reports suggest that within seconds, those closest to the inner circle began exchanging subtle glances, not of confusion, but of calculation. They understood that this was not a casual remark, not a fleeting expression of approval. It was something far more deliberate, a signal that could not be ignored, no matter how much the institution might try to contain it. For some, the meaning was immediate. A symbolic endorsement of Catherine, Princess of Wales, that extended beyond her current role, beyond her position, as a supportive figure beside Prince William. It was a shift, subtle in wording, but immense in implication. Catherine, who had long been seen as steady, reliable, and quietly influential, was now being placed at the center of something much larger. And with that shift came tension, sharp, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. Because if Catherine was being elevated, even symbolically, it raised an uncomfortable question about where that left others within the hierarchy. At the heart of that tension stood Queen Camilla. Her position, firmly established on the surface, suddenly found itself under a different kind of scrutiny. Not openly, not publicly, but within the silent calculations that define royal dynamics. Various interpretations began to circulate almost immediately among insiders, some suggesting that Charles's words were simply a reflection of admiration, others whispering that they carried a deeper, more strategic intent. And it was within those differing interpretations that the real conflict began to take shape. Because ambiguity, within a system built on structure, is often more destabilizing than clarity. Behind the scenes, the response was swift. Palace aides, trained to manage perception as much as reality, moved quickly to assess the situation. Reports indicate that internal discussions began almost immediately, focused on how to contain the narrative before it extended beyond control. But the challenge was clear. This was not a statement that could be easily reframed or softened. It had been public, direct, and most importantly, it had been witnessed by individuals who understood exactly how to interpret it. Within hours, whispers began to find their way beyond palace walls, not through official channels, but through the quiet, controlled leaks that often shape public perception long before any formal statement is made. Media outlets began to pick up fragments of the story, each offering its own interpretation, each adding another layer to the growing narrative. As the night gave way to morning, the ripple effect only intensified. Catherine's role, once clearly defined within the structure of the monarchy, began to take on a new dimension. She was no longer seen solely as a supportive figure standing beside the future king. She was becoming something more central, more significant, whether by design or by consequence. And that shift, once set in motion, could not be reversed. It altered how she was perceived, how she was discussed, and perhaps most importantly, how she would be positioned in the decisions that lay ahead. Yet for all the speculation, for all the analysis unfolding both inside and outside the palace, one truth remained clear to those within the institution itself. This was not an accident, not a moment of weakness or emotional impulse. It was calculated, strategic, a move made with full awareness of its impact, even if the full extent of that impact had yet to reveal itself. And while the world outside tried to decode the meaning, those within the palace already understood this wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. By morning, the banquet's elegance had vanished, replaced by whispers, closed-door meetings, and a tension so thick it could be felt in every corridor of the palace. Because what had been said could not be unsaid, and what had been implied could not be ignored. The night's carefully maintained composure had dissolved into something far more fragile, far more unpredictable. Reports suggest that before the sun had fully risen, senior aides were already being summoned, their schedules abruptly cleared, their focus redirected toward a single, pressing question: what exactly had been set in motion. Inside those private rooms, conversations were no longer about presentation or ceremony. They were about consequence, about interpretation, about control. Because within the monarchy, a statement like that does not exist in isolation. It reshapes expectations, it alters loyalties, and it forces decisions that can no longer be postponed. At the center of this unfolding tension stood Queen Camilla, outwardly composed, her position unchanged, yet insiders would later whisper that beneath that calm exterior, there was a growing unease. Various interpretations of the previous night's events began to circulate, some suggesting that Charles's words had inadvertently shifted focus away from her established role, others hinting at something far more deliberate. For someone whose influence had been carefully built and steadily maintained, even the suggestion of a shift was enough to unsettle the balance. Because in a system defined by hierarchy, perception can be as powerful as reality. And once perception begins to change, it becomes increasingly difficult to contain. Meanwhile, Catherine, Princess of Wales, remained exactly as she had always been: composed, measured, unwavering. Yet the weight placed upon her had undeniably changed. The attention, once respectful and steady, had intensified into something sharper, more scrutinizing. Every action, every word, every absence now carried a different meaning. But rather than react, she held her position with quiet strength, neither stepping forward nor retreating, allowing the moment to unfold without disruption. It was this restraint, insiders suggest, that only deepened the perception that she was not simply a participant in the monarchy's future, but a central figure within it. Beside her, Prince William moved with increasing precision. His role, already significant, began to take on a more protective edge. Not overtly, not in a way that would draw public attention, but in the subtle shifts that those within the institution are trained to recognize. Meetings became more focused, decisions more deliberate, his presence more constant. It was as though he understood that this moment required more than quiet support, it demanded strategy. Because what had begun as a single declaration was now evolving into something far more complex, something that would require careful navigation to prevent it from escalating beyond control. Outside the palace walls, the narrative fractured almost immediately. Media outlets, drawing on fragments of information and varying interpretations, began constructing competing versions of the story. Some framed it as a symbolic gesture, a moment of personal admiration amplified by circumstance. Others suggested it marked the beginning of a deeper shift within the monarchy, one that could redefine roles long considered fixed. And within that division, the uncertainty only grew, because the truth, as it often does in moments like this, remained just out of reach, visible enough to provoke speculation, but obscured enough to resist confirmation. What became increasingly clear, however, was that the monarchy was no longer operating within its usual equilibrium. A new dynamic had emerged, unexpected, unplanned, yet impossible to ignore. Relationships that once followed a predictable structure now carried an undercurrent of tension. Roles that once felt secure now seemed open to interpretation. And as each passing hour added another layer to the unfolding narrative, the institution found itself navigating a situation it could not easily control. Because as tensions escalated behind closed doors, a deeper truth began to emerge. This moment had been carefully set in motion long before the banquet ever began. In royal history, legacy is never rewritten overnight. It is shaped quietly, deliberately, until one moment forces it into the light. And for Catherine, Princess of Wales, that moment had finally arrived, whether she had chosen it or not. What made that moment so powerful was not just the words spoken by King Charles III, but everything that had come before it: the years of quiet endurance, the discipline of restraint, the unwavering commitment to a role that demanded more than it ever revealed. Catherine's journey within the royal family had never been defined by sudden moves or dramatic assertions. Instead, it had been built slowly, step by step, shaped by expectation, tested by scrutiny, and refined through moments of both public praise and private pressure. From the very beginning, she had understood something fundamental about the monarchy: that it rewards consistency, not noise, stability, not spectacle. And so, while others moved quickly, seeking influence or visibility, she remained steady, allowing time to do what force could not. That steadiness became her strength. Over the years, she developed a reputation that was not easily shaken, one rooted in duty, composure, and an almost unbreakable connection with public trust. Reports suggest that even within the palace, where perceptions are often divided, there was a growing consensus about her role. She was not just reliable, she was essential. The kind of figure who could hold attention without demanding it, who could navigate pressure without allowing it to define her. And in a system as delicate as the monarchy, where every action is measured against centuries of tradition, that kind of presence carries extraordinary weight. It is not easily created, and once established, it becomes almost impossible to replace. There were, inevitably, comparisons, not spoken loudly, not acknowledged officially, but present in the quiet reflections of those who study the monarchy's past as closely as they observe its present. Figures from previous generations who had, in their own way, shaped the direction of the crown not through authority alone, but through influence, through perception, through an ability to embody something larger than themselves. Catherine's name began to appear in those same conversations, not as a direct parallel, but as part of a pattern, a continuation of a legacy that emerges only when the institution finds itself at a crossroads. And it was precisely at such a crossroads that Charles's words carried their greatest significance, because his public endorsement, whether interpreted as symbolic or strategic, did something irreversible. It shifted the narrative, it redefined expectations. It placed Catherine at the center of a conversation she had never actively sought, but could no longer step away from. Beyond the palace walls, that shift did not go unnoticed. Public sentiment, already favorable, began to align more strongly around her, reinforcing the perception that she represented not just continuity, but the future itself. It was not a sudden surge of support, but a steady consolidation and agreement forming across different perspectives that she embodied the qualities the monarchy needed to move forward. And within that growing support, the institution itself began to adjust, almost imperceptibly, to a new reality. Roles were not officially changed, titles remained the same, but the balance had shifted, the focus had moved. The center of gravity, once firmly anchored elsewhere, was beginning to realign. Yet with every shift comes consequence. Because the rise of one figure within a system built on hierarchy inevitably alters the position of others. And while Catherine's role appeared to solidify with each passing moment, the implications of that shift extended far beyond her alone. It raised questions quiet but persistent about influence, about priority, about who stood to gain and who stood to lose as the monarchy moved toward this emerging future. And it was within those unanswered questions that the real tension began to take shape, because even as her role solidified, one question remained unanswered: what did this mean for those who stood to lose the most? Power within the monarchy is rarely seized in public. It is negotiated, resisted, and sometimes quietly fought behind closed doors. And as Catherine, Princess of Wales's position strengthened, not everyone was prepared to accept what it meant. What had begun as a subtle shift in perception was now evolving into something far more complex, far more strategic. Reports suggest that within the inner workings of the palace, a divide had started to take shape, not loud, not visible to the outside world, but deeply felt among those who understood how power truly moves within the institution. On one side stood the traditionalists, figures who believed firmly in preserving the established hierarchy, maintaining the balance that had defined the monarchy for decades. On the other side, emerging voices, quieter, more adaptive, began to recognize that the future could not simply mirror the past. And at the center of this growing divide was Catherine, not as an instigator, but as a symbol of change that could no longer be ignored. For Queen Camilla, this shift introduced a new layer of complexity. Her position, once clearly defined, now existed within a landscape that was subtly but unmistakably evolving. Various interpretations circulated among insiders, some suggesting that her influence remained intact, others hinting that the balance was beginning to tilt in ways that could not be easily reversed. It was not a matter of open conflict. Nothing so direct ever unfolds within the monarchy, but rather a quiet recalibration of roles, where influence is measured not by titles alone, but by presence, perception, and the ability to shape the narrative without appearing to do so. And within that recalibration, even the smallest shift can carry significant consequences. Resistance, when it appeared, did so in the only way it could be: subtle, controlled, almost invisible. Certain royal circles, long accustomed to a predictable structure, began to push back in quiet ways, not through public statements or overt challenges, but through hesitation, through delayed decisions, through the kind of quiet skepticism that can slow momentum without ever fully stopping it. Those familiar with the institution would recognize this pattern immediately. It is how the monarchy defends itself, not through confrontation but through endurance. And yet, for every moment of resistance, there was an equal and opposite force beginning to take shape. That force was the growing unity between Prince William and Catherine. What had once been seen as a partnership defined by support and shared duty was now evolving into something more strategic, more deliberate. Reports suggest that their alignment had strengthened in recent months, not just in public appearances, but in the decisions made behind the scenes. There was a sense of coordination, of quiet understanding, as though both were fully aware of the shifting landscape and the role they would need to play within it. William's approach, measured and precise, complemented Catherine's composure, creating a dynamic that was not easily disrupted. And together, they worked together to achieve great things. They began to form a presence that carried both stability and forward momentum, an indication that the monarchy's future might already be taking shape in ways that had not yet been formally acknowledged. As these forces continued to move beneath the surface, the institution itself found itself navigating an internal transformation. Not dramatic, not sudden, but undeniable. Roles that had once felt fixed were now being reconsidered, adjusted to accommodate a reality that was still unfolding. The question of succession, always present but rarely urgent, began to take on a new level of significance. Not because anything had officially changed, but because the perception of what could change had become impossible to ignore. And within that uncertainty, the monarchy faced a challenge it could not easily resolve: how to evolve without appearing to disrupt the very traditions it was built to protect. And as the quiet struggle continued, layered with strategy, restraint, and unspoken intent, one truth became increasingly clear. This was no longer about a single statement, a single moment, or even a single figure. It was about the direction of the institution itself, the path it would choose, the future it would shape. And as the dust began to settle, one undeniable reality remained: this was no longer just about one moment, but about the future of the crown itself. The crown does not change easily. It resists, it endures, it adapts only when it must. But sometimes, a single moment, one declaration, one decision can shift its course forever. And what happened inside Windsor Castle may have done exactly that. What began as a pause, a deviation, a few carefully chosen words from King Charles III, has now evolved into something far more profound, something that cannot be contained within the walls of a single evening. Because within the monarchy, moments like these do not fade, they settle, they take root, and over time, they reshape the very structure they once seemed to merely disturb. Reports suggest that long after the banquet ended, the implications of that declaration continued to unfold, quietly influencing conversations, decisions, and perceptions in ways that may not fully reveal themselves for years to come. At the center of this transformation stands Catherine, Princess of Wales, no longer viewed solely as a supporting figure within the royal framework, but as a defining presence in its future. What makes her position so significant is not just the endorsement she received, but the foundation she had already built long before that moment arrived. Stability, trust, consistency. These are not qualities that emerge overnight, and yet, they are precisely what the monarchy now finds itself leaning toward as it navigates an increasingly uncertain landscape. Catherine's role, once quietly influential, has become undeniably central, whether formally acknowledged or not. And with that shift comes a new expectation, one that carries both opportunity and pressure in equal measure. Outside the palace, public perception has begun to align with these internal changes. What was once speculation has gradually turned into acceptance, as audiences observe not just what is said, but what is implied, what is reinforced through presence and action. The monarchy, always dependent on the delicate balance between tradition and public trust, now finds itself entering a new phase, one defined by both stability and tension. Stability, in the form of figures who represent continuity and reliability. Tension, in the unresolved questions that continue to linger beneath the surface, shaping decisions that have yet to be fully revealed. Because while the direction may appear clearer, the path itself remains uncertain. The importance of legacy, of duty, of maintaining a sense of continuity that stretches beyond any one individual, has never been more critical. The crown is not just an institution, it is a symbol, one that must endure beyond moments of uncertainty, beyond shifts in influence, beyond the quiet struggles that define its evolution. And yet, even as it adapts, it carries with it the weight of every decision, every declaration, every subtle change that contributes to its ongoing story. What remains unanswered, however, is perhaps the most compelling part of all. How will this shift fully manifest? What roles will be redefined as a result? And how will those who find themselves on uncertain ground respond to a reality that is still taking shape? These questions linger, not loudly, not openly, but persistently woven into the fabric of the monarchy's next chapter. Because the story is far from over. If anything, it is only just beginning to reveal its true direction, and in that uncertainty lies the essence of what makes this moment so significant. Not just what has been said, not just what has been implied, but what is yet to come. Because in the end, the crown is never just passed on, it is shaped by those bold enough to redefine it, and by those willing to declare, for all the world to hear, exactly who it belongs to next. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.